Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of the history of English. And last time we talked about the Anglo-Saxon invasion, or when the Germans got there. And now we're going to get into the result of that, which is Old English. So come along, it will be a fun ride. So now we are in the 5th century, up until about the 11th century. So we are going to have an explosion where Celtic, which is the language that the people originally spoke, and Latin, because they're going to be here in a minute, meets German. So the Angles and the Saxons invaded already. The Jutes were there, but they got killed, remember? So England is going to do what it does best, which is get invaded again, except this time they're the Vikings, right? These are from Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, right? They come in. So the other guys, they were down here. But they come, they invade. It's England now, remember, because the Angles won. And we have the Viking invasion. So they're going to come and bring their own words. In addition to the Vikings, the church is also going to get English crazy, and they're going to start establishing churches everywhere across England. Now, the language of the church is Latin, so that is very different. If you remember from the first video, that language tree, Latin and those Romance languages are on a totally separate branch. Oh, while we're here, Romance. Everybody's like, Romance, love, yay! It's, French is the sexiest language. Yeah, Romance literally just means that the Romans used it. So a romance is a story written in Latin. That's the earlier meaning of it. Didn't have anything to do with love until way, way, way later. But for now, we've got the Viking invasion and the invasion of Latin-speaking religious proselytizers. And when you're done with all of that blending together, Celtic, Latin, and Germanic, you end up with Old English. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the story of Beowulf. There was a movie. I'm sorry, Neil Gaiman, but it's 2 hours of your life you'll never get back now. I love Neil Gaiman in my soul, but that book was not the same story. So if you're going to read Beowulf, you have to read the original. Now, when I say the original, you don't have to read it in the original. Beowulf is a poem that has been translated for your reading pleasure. But here's the original. That's what it looked like on the page, and I don't feel so bad about my handwriting anymore. And it looks like this. So how would you say this? You would say what, right? What? If you've ever seen the episode of Family Guy where Stewie walks around going whip, right? What? That's Old English. We used to say the H and then we stopped. But you have what, we gardena, in yardium, theud kininga, thrim yefronin, hutha ethelingus ellen fremedon. Offshield shething sheathanum threatum monogum megthum metosetla of tea exoda eorlas. Sithineris werth feesha fundin he thas rofre yabad weox under wolknum werth minden tha all that wim alwich thara im setendra offer hun rade hiran shoulda gomban yildan. That was good cuning. And there's more, but that is enough. Now, if you look at this, you're like, how is that English? It sounds very German. I get it. But if you look here, you're like, we, okay, that's the same. That's the same collective we. Yeah, that's an old word. So is in. Love our prepositions. They've been around in English for a long time. What is really old? But probably the closest is this down here. You get that was good cuning, that was a good king. So you're like, oh, okay, I can kind of hear it, maybe. So that is Old English. That's what it originally looked and sounded like. Now, how do you get from this to what we're speaking today? England gonna get invaded again. Surprise! But a couple of things to keep in mind about Old English. Oh, and here's what it says. Haha, you probably want to know. It says, so the Spear Danes, this is the Seamus Heaney translation, so he's done a little poetic license here, which some people hate, but I think is good. And you get, all the kings who ruled them, and then we've heard of those princes' heroic campaigns, Shield Chieftain, Scourge of Tribes, Wrecker of Meat Benches, rampaging among foes. He had come very far. He was a foundling, an orphan, and he would flourish, and his powers waxed. He proved his worth, and in the end, everybody paid tribute to him. The Whale Road is one of those fun little old turns of phrase, and then that was good king. That was one good king, or that was a good king. So this is not the Beowulf that you're expecting from Beowulf. Beowulf's going to show up much later on, but this is the intro, the first few lines. So that's Old English. Now, a note, because when you talk about grammar, grammar being the rules of how you use a language, this difference between an inflected language and a language that relies on syntax becomes very important. Now, let's talk about this. Okay, an inflected language is a language that changes the ending of the word to show you what it means. In other words, like I took a lot of Italian in high school, and now all I can say is, where's the bathroom and how much does it cost? But anyway, in that class, we would have our teacher would have us do what is called parsing, where he would stand at the front of the room and he would yell at us, and we would have to go parlo, parlay, parliamo, parlate, right? Because parlare in English, in Italian means to speak, right? A-R-A at the end means to, so that's the infinitive form of the verb. But if I want to say I speak, I say parlo, I change the end. If I want to say we speak, I say parliamo, right? I change the end. So an inflected language is one that changes the ending to tell you what the function of the word is in the sentence. English doesn't really do that. The only thing we do is occasionally we'll add an S to a verb, but for the most part, we are not inflected. We rely on syntax, which is word order. So if you want to speak to mean to speak, the act of speaking, you have to put a to and a speak next to each other. If I say speak to, that means something different. This is why Yoda can play with our language only up to a certain point, and then eventually you lose the meaning completely. Like, you got a little bit of fluidity in the English, but not as much. Other languages, Romance languages, you have a lot more fluidity in where you can put a word in a sentence and still have communication occur. So that's what the difference is. Our grammar rules are written down by monks who worship Latin because they think Latin is the best language ever. Latin is inflected. So our rules are for an inflected language, except our language is Germanic, which is not inflected, which is why all of our grammar rules seem to not make sense. But the other thing is spelling. Spelling and handwriting is a big problem. So if you look at this, you're like, all right, we got a bunch of A's and E's. We'll figure this out. Not today. This is a problem that English is going to struggle with for the next, several hundred years. But what really makes things crazy is you've got different sounds. You've got this sound right here, this D almost with a slash. That's a TH sound. That's a th sound. And then F, V, S, U, those are all negotiable. You're gonna write those however you want, and then people will say them however they want for the next couple hundred years. So our spelling is going to be weird because it has nothing to do with the letters and the sounds that it makes, but this is where English gets its start. So if you've ever struggled with the spelling test and you want to know why, this is part of the problem. Now, from here, we are going to move on because, of course, England is going to get invaded again, but not yet. You'll have to come back for part 3. Thanks.